Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to our sixth Scholars in the Square lecture of 2025. Just a quick word about format for those of you who might be new to it, Zoom land. Hinna Hussain will offer a 20-minute public presentation, and then she's going to engage in a 20-minute period of conversation with Dr. Zahira Jinnah, who is a professor in UDIC Social Work Department, and she specializes in migration studies and Islamophobia. I'm happy to say that Zahira is also a CSRS faculty fellow with us this term. And after Zahira and Hinna talk, I'm going to chair a 20-minute conversation kind of among the folks in the room and people who are with us through Zoom. Scott will give you some sense about how you can have your questions circulated in the room through Zoom. Our speaker today is Hinna Hussain, who since 2022 has been in the Religious Studies PhD program at the University of Ottawa. Her focus is on the interaction between religious and environmental issues. Prior to starting her PhD, she completed 3 master's degrees, which seems gluttonous. She had an MA, she finished an MA in Muslim cultures at the Aga Khan University in London in 2016, an MS in social sciences at the Bhutto Institute of Science and Technology in Karachi in 2012, and an MA in philosophy at the University of Karachi in 2010. I think you can trade into those for at least another PhD.
So the idea is, my first master's was a shorter one. So
okay.
That's actually.
Let us be impressed.
Yeah.
3 masters.
Yes, extremely impressive. Hinna is also involved in Laurie Beeman's large international project on the implications of the powerful drift away from conventional religion that we see in Canada. Among other things, Hinna is interested in the ways religious, spiritual, and post-religious communities respond to climate crises that we see all around us. He's certainly aware of the important role played in these movements by Indigenous communities in Canada and elsewhere. And so I know she's going to join her voice to mine to acknowledge and respect the Lekwungen, Songhees, and Esquimalt peoples on whose traditional territory the university stands, and the Lekwungen and the Salish peoples whose historical relationships with the land continue to this day. So please join me in welcoming Hinna to Scholars in the Square.
Thank you, Paul, for your introduction. I want to extend my thanks to you, Paul, to Rachel, to Scott, and Enrico for organizing this lecture and giving me the opportunity to speak to you, Paul, today. I will talk about my research and maybe pick up 1 or 2 themes and talk about that. I want to start my presentation by sharing this one of very powerful quotes from one of my research participants, and it will give you some idea what I'm going to talk about today. It says, I think for me, the primary motivation for the environmental work was around what is my legacy. I recognize that part of my legacy is how I connect with my communities and the space that I leave for the future generations. It emphasizes how connecting with communities and caring for future generations motivates environmental actions among people. I want to give a little bit of my background and my positionality and how I why I wanted to work on this topic. It stems from my own personal background. I am a Shia Ismaili Muslim from Pakistan, and Shia Ismaili Muslims are minority among the majority Sunni Islam in Pakistan, and religion is pretty much instrumentalized in Pakistan, where we have limited freedom of expression, limited freedom of religious expression. Going to mosque is not a very easy thing. Publicly articulating your opinions about religion is a difficult task. There were attacks on religious and on Ismailis even in Karachi. So, and being a woman in this context, it made me always think, why is religion playing such a negative role when it has so much potential to play a positive role in the society? And with all these things in mind, and when I did my master's from Aga Khan University International in the UK in Muslim cultures, I kind of worked on interfaith interactions of Muslim participants. I also looked at how Muslims were, Sunnis and Ismaili Muslims were engaging with people outside their communities and how they were engaging with people from other faiths. And there were some everyday interactions for sure, but I thought there is something which is lacking, and which was why not they work on issues that were concerned for everyone. Why aren't they working on major challenges such as environment or climate change? Why are they just working on big everyday communications and not going beyond that? So on that note, I thought environment is a key thing, and I should probably explore more if there are more ventures going on. This was done in Canada only, but barely the activities I could see was mostly about the plantation drives or just tree planting activities, nothing very substantial. Uh, for me, environment was always a point of healing and a point of connection. So I went back to the texts of Islam and Muslim texts and scholars and saw if there is any connection between Islam and the environment. And there were so many things, so many ideas, so many examples and stories present in the literature. And I saw there is a gap. So there was a potential to work on this topic. And I also saw this is something that not just Muslims are concerned about, every other religion, every other person is concerned about. So I thought there is a common point of connection, and I thought environment is that point of connection, and that's how I started working on my research topic. When we place this idea of religion and environment in a wider scholarship, we see that a lot of emphasis is given on the idea that people are getting inspiration to work on environment from religion. And authors like Gate, Nasser, and so many other authors are actually focusing on the religious aspect of it. And the literature is full of, especially when I talk in terms of Muslim literature, is full of the idea of stewardship, where the idea of Khalifa is there, humans being the guardians and caretakers of other beings on the planet in physical absence of God. So this idea is particularly there. Then there's idea of equitable use of resources, and a lot of prophets' legacies around caring of animals and birds, and how to be nice to them, and how to be considerate towards natural resources. And many scholars, poets, Sufis, they have also devoted much thought on this idea, where people like Fariduddin Attar, mentioning stories about animals and birds and how do they speak to God, how do they relate to God. So they're not nothing in the picture. Even animals and plants and birds are there, and they are important. And then now the recent idea is there, where a lot of authors are talking about green deen or green religion, green Islam, and people are also talking about green jihad or green holy war, eco-Islam, eco-Muslim feminism, green Ramzan or green period of fasting. So these ideas are also there. And this is one part of the scholarship that engages with religion and environment. But other authors like Beeman and Pauls, they talk about that the idea to work on environment is not solely coming from religion. There are also other factors, including the idea of shared commitment to work for a common, better future. Socioeconomic and political factors are there, cultural considerations are there. And I kind of follow this line of thought. Okay. In my perspective, the religious worldviews and ideas are intertwined with the identities of Muslims, influencing their views on environmental matters. Nevertheless, environmental attitudes may draw inspiration from sources beyond religion as well. In this study, I propose that desire to work on environmental concerns among Muslims goes beyond the religious dynamics in everyday life. Instead, it relies on the value of shared commitment to work on concerns that impact everyone. And with that premise, I aim to explore how environmental issues in everyday settings is serving as an avenue for Muslims to engage with people of other diverse backgrounds, religious as well as non-religious. I aim to explore how Muslims interact and engage with people of different faiths and backgrounds, face challenges during this environmental drives with them or environmental initiatives with them? How do they face challenges? How do they overcome these challenges? How do they navigate the differences? And when I say Muslims, I do acknowledge that Muslim is not a monolithic community. It's a diversity of people from diverse backgrounds, age groups, schools of interpretations, cultures, even nationalities. Now I want to little bit give you an idea about who are my research participants and where are they located. So 50% of my research participants are Muslims. I'm doing this research in Canada. Cities are Toronto, Ottawa, and I have so far done some data collection in Ottawa and Toronto, and Victoria and Vancouver. I'm going to start soon. So this is kind of work in progress. Besides that, I am looking at people from Muslim faith, non-Muslims, as well as non-religions. People who are 18 years and above are my research participants and who have been engaged in any kind of environmental issues, either it be advocacy, either it be environmental initiatives or programs or awareness. I am not looking at Muslim organizations or groups who are working on environmental causes here. Also focusing on people who have been in Canada for minimum of 3 years, with the basic assumption that minimum of 3 years is when they can sort their basic accommodations, job, they get their children to schools and these things. And there is no gender restriction for my research participants. Oh, I am using snowballing method for my data sampling. This method is really helping where one participant refers to another participant and then you get the different participants for your data collection. And I'm collecting data through interviews as well as observations. For my sampling, I would say one thing, it's always challenging when you work with Muslims, data collection or making people agree for interview is not an easy task. I would share one of the participants, when I was interviewing her, she said, I ignored your first email and then on second email, I saw a Muslim non-white name and that's why I responded back to you. Mm-hmm. So these kind of connotations are always there. It's too much loaded. I don't want to talk about every single thing that I'm covering, but I'm briefly going to talk about 3 things. First is factors responsible. So there are a few factors that I have noticed, and this is again work in progress. This is basic and first level of data analysis. When I started looking at the factors that are impacting people's engagement in environmental issues, I saw that people's childhood experience and exposure to nature is very important. If they have been going to picnics, to lakes, woods, are going to green spaces, parks, have gardens in their homes, it has so much relationship how they later experience their connection with nature and environment, and that's why they feel more connected to work on such issues. Also, a few of my research participants are coming from developing countries, and they mentioned that the lifestyle back then was different and they didn't have much access to green spaces and environmental issues were not their main priorities. So that's why they have a different approach to these issues. And one of the main thing was also people from Mississauga and Brampton identified specifically this, that they are recent immigrants. Few of them are recent immigrants and they are living in low economic areas. That's why they don't have easy access to either green spaces or environmental issues are not their immediate consideration. And people are more likely to work on such causes if they are directly impacted themselves or their communities are directly impacted by these issues. One of the major theme that is coming is people's motivation to work on environmental causes and engage with other people on such issues. unanimously, irrespective to any gender, any background, any religious affiliation, everybody said that they want to save their future generations. And that's why they are motivated to work on environmental causes. It's too late already. They don't want to waste the time and they just want to act so they can save the environment, they can save the planet. There is also an idea of personal motivation towards environment. People want to save the environment because they have their own associations, different kind of associations with environment. Some people think that environment has healed them during COVID-19 and they see the value of environment through that. Other people think it's going for hikes or going to parks gives them a lot of space for reflection and introspection. That's why they want to save it. So there are personal reasons to engage with it as well. Apart from it, it is very interesting. Few participants mentioned that they are close to nature and they are connected to nature. That's why they want to save it. In fact, they are the part of nature or they are nature themselves. But none of the person from any religious background shared the same idea. So it's mostly coming from people who have who don't believe in religion as such. This can be probably linked to the idea of stewardship that is present in religions. That is part of our next slide. We will look into that. Also, a lot of people said that it's not the religion that is supporting their idea or that is supporting their motivation to work on environmental causes. But two Muslims said that it's coming from their religion, but they didn't have a clear understanding of what exactly their religion is talking about the environment, but they said it's coming from the religion. And the next main theme for my presentation is regarding the stewardship. Stewardship in Islam, the idea of Khalifa is there. Khalifa is understood as guardian, caretaker. So there is a lot of interconnectedness of humans with other beings. Humans are being held responsible for the beings below them, like animals and plants and nature, to protect them, to save them. And humans are being made accountable to protect them. And this is one of the prominent themes in my research. Participants from religious background are calling this responsibility or this human responsibility as stewardship, and participants from non-religious background is calling this as participants for religious backgrounds are calling this as stewardship, and participants from non-religious background is calling this as responsibility. When I inquired why are they concerned towards the idea of stewardship and where is it coming from, they again said it's the common concern and it's coming because we all want to save the planet and we all want to save the future. I just want you to look at this picture and in your mind, just number these pictures in terms of their significance in your life. I think this picture really illustrates a perceived sense of hierarchy, how we as humans position ourselves in reference to other beings, in reference to animals, plants, nature, God, and other angels. So this kind of hierarchy, participants believes this hierarchy is not something which is positive. It is damaging in their perspective. They think that humans have done a lot. Humans being on the higher position of the hierarchy, they have done a lot of good. They have done a lot of scientific discoveries. They have achieved a lot of new endeavors. But at the same time, they have equally harmed the environment and natural resources. And this position of human being at the top or at the higher level of hierarchy is pretty problematic for them. So in light of these things, I would say that re-evaluating how we view stewardship is really essential. By shifting our focus from dominance to more of responsibility, we can create a more inclusive and cooperative approach. As we all are working towards the common goal, it is important to involve everyone in this discussion together because it's a massive issue and we cannot sort this in silos, regardless they have similar spiritual beliefs or not, regardless they have similar religions or not. It's just so important to work for this common thing. I want to conclude by one of my participants' quote, and I think it is very powerful quote to end. She says, you are taught that humans are like at the top of the pyramid. I don't agree with this. We have always felt like we are at the top and that we are superior, that we have caused everything that is happening in the world. We are not superior species because what we have done is not something that superior species would do, but we are definitely at the top of pyramid in terms of being responsible for everyone below us. And so we pick up the pieces of all the things that we have broken, that we make sure they don't break the rest of the planet before it perishes. Again, these responses are from my observations and interviews in Ottawa. I'm excited to see how the data emerges in Victoria and Vancouver. I already see a more connection to environment in this part of Canada, but I'm excited to explore it. Thank you.
Elsevier will join us at the front, and I will lightly steward the conversation. Yeah. So, Scott, can you see everybody?
You could slide this way just a little bit, both of you.
You should have marks on the floor.
Yeah, that's true. That's a good point. Yeah, any tape.
Right? Good.
That's good.
Okay. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Hinna. That's lovely. I really enjoyed listening to a small snapshot of what promises to be really exciting work. So, I'm immediately sort of struck by this relationship between Islam and the environment, right? It's such a rich and robust literature. The Quran is so full of stories of, in fact, of nations and of creations, even before the prophet, right? Looking at like the chapters on the spider, the chapters on the ants, for example, in which ants were speaking to each other, and this idea of common cause and responsibilities is so prominent a theme, even in the Quran, and in scholarship throughout. So I'm wondering whether you want to just maybe elaborate a little bit more about this relationship between Islam and the environment. We've spoken about the Khalifa a little bit, but perhaps about other concepts, Hima, Hira.
Yeah. So there are so many ideas, I think, which are outlined by Islam. So the idea of stewardship or responsibility is not just there to exploit it. It comes with a lot of guidelines, a lot of examples, a lot of rules and principles to explain so that human becomes more accountable towards this responsibility. So like I would give an example of the idea of Himma and Harim, and these are two concepts where these Himma is like a conservation area of wilderness or a protected area for animal sanctuary, which can where external sources or people cannot go in that. Harim is like protected area for water, where outside forces cannot exploit that water resources. So these ideas are there. Apart from that, there are so many prophetic stories, like Prophet was kind to even the camel that was in his yard. There is a big discussion around equitable use of resources. The idea of mizan is there in Quran, which means the balance. There is a big critique among Muslim authors and scholars when they say that environmental issues are arising because the resources are not equitably distributed or used by a lot of people. And then there is a whole discussion around how these issues, how these resources are exploited by Western or capitalist tendencies. So these ideas are always there. One idea is linked to another, but yeah, of course, there are so many.
Yeah, thank you. Do you want to talk a little bit more about this idea of protected spaces of water and of sanctuaries and what their significance is? We know in the text what their significance is, perhaps, but in sort of more contemporary times, how do people take up these ideas?
So basically, if I start with a very basic example, I would say people go for hikes, people go to parks, people go to a lot of forests, and they kind of they are not sometimes considerate about the animals there, the plants and other species there. So this idea is, I think, somewhat counter to that having a protected area where you can give animals their space. There are fishes there, birds are there. You don't hunt that in that areas. You don't destroy the natural habitat of that area. It's more on those lines.
Okay, thank you. You spoke a little bit about being an Ismaili Muslim in Pakistan, and seeing religion always as something negative or exclusionary. And one of your sort of motivations for doing this was to explore whether religion could be something as a positive force that would prompt people to do good and to come together, right? What's sort of significance of that for you as a Muslim minority back in Pakistan, but also as a very different minority here?
Doing this to bring people together.
Yeah, and for doing this work.
Yeah, I think there are a few things. I was reading actually two research projects, one in Germany, one in the UK. Both of them in different ways talk about that, how Muslims' engagement in different environmental work in their own cities are contributing to create a positive image of Muslims in that overall society. So there is an implied idea that there is Islamophobia, there is negative image of Muslims. And having that in mind and then seeing environment as a force, not just to have a better image of Muslims, because they will align with the broader values of the society by working on environment. Also because it is something that is there present in their own value system. So I see it's like a bridging force to bring people together. Also, I think it's important to bring people together in different capacities. Otherwise, we have seen very ugly faces of religion at all political level, even if there is a political interpretation to the idea of Khalifa as well, right? So if we use all these things in a negative way, it can be really harmful, very exploitative. We have seen wars and massive destruction if we don't work on that.
Could you, you just mentioned the other reading of Khalifa. Could you speak about how it's used in these two different ways? Because I'm wondering if there's a kind of an interesting rub there.
Yeah. Sometimes anglicized as the caliphate, right?
Yes, I am still exploring that, but the Khalif word or Khalifa word is used for successor or successorship, caliphate successorship. And it has a political connotation as well as here we see this in environmental context. Human being the representative of God on the earth. So human kind of gets this authority to establish his rule on the earth in the name of God. When human has this authority, we have seen in the history, we are seeing it now in all forms of war. We have seen it in every single tendency, either it be a mosque, either it be on a political level, this authority is exploited in several ways. And so I think because there is Khalifa and Caliphate in a political connotation, for me, everything comes with a responsibility. So even if Caliphate is looked in a political lens or it's looked from an environmental lens, it both has an embedded sense of responsibility, which is often misused. And that's why we see a lot of political discourse, a lot of political unrest in that.
Thank you.
Thanks for explaining that. I think this idea of power and responsibility, hangs throughout the work and indeed the world. What do you want to talk more about your findings? I know it's very early, but already quite a bit of rich things that I imagine.
Yeah. There is a lot of discourse about North, or I would say East and West in my data, as expected.
Right.
So people, especially, this is very much particular to Muslims comments, who are coming from developing countries. They are
And it's a diverse group of Muslims in your sample, right?
It is diverse group of Muslims, Muslims coming from African countries, Muslims coming from South Asian countries, even Muslims born in Canada. So there's a diverse group of Muslims, but this is particularly for Muslims coming from developing countries. They are mentioning that this all environmental issues, all these climate changes created by Western countries, and Eastern countries are actually bearing the cost of it. And actually, they are the ones who have done least harm to the environment. So
They're trying to catch up.
yeah,
They're doing their best, but they don't have the tools.
yeah. So this is one of the things which is present in all the
Right. So like this
findings.
finding, the feeling that that people from developing countries are disproportionately burdened by the environmental impact that's caused by the West and industrial capital.
Also, they mentioning
Imperial
at
power, right?
several points that we don't relate to it because we have not done this kind of harm to the environment.
Could you stay on that for a second? And because that might be a motivation for someone to disengage. Someone who comes from away and comes to Canada. I could see them saying, well, look, you know what?
Your problem.
That's your problem.
Yeah.
We're suffering way worse in Pakistan or wherever. So, but yet they don't. Why do you think that is?
I think one of the things is because here they see a different society. They see a lot of efforts going on for protection of the environment. Also, I saw that participants were criticizing mosques and their own communities for not doing enough, but still they are mentioning the efforts that are being done by their own communities in Canada. So that is one factor there. Also, there's kids are going to schools now. They are learning about environment and environmental values. Also, we live on the lands of indigenous people, and their presence is always there. So they all hear about these things. It's just it's kind of hard for them to detach from past and accept the realities of future, but they are hanging somewhere in between for now, I think.
Okay, so kind of like ironically now more aware of it, even though perhaps some of the genesis of those teachings would be found in the faith, right? It's interesting, yeah. You also were kind of exploring, so maybe tell us a little bit more about your sample. So you've got Muslims, and then you've got other faith groups, and then no faith groups. And so who's the other? I like the idea of the Muslim not being the other here. But who's the other?
Nice. Okay, so my sample consists of 50% of Muslims, and I didn't want to call it. I was debating between other or other faiths, other religions.
I had to put it on there. I'm sorry.
Diverse religions. I just kept debating.
Non-Muslims.
I started with non-Muslims, but that it is just too much Muslim lens to look at it. So I was kind of, debating between those things. So people from different religions, Muslims, people from different religions, people from different spiritualities, and people who don't identify themselves with any religion. So we have a important part of my research participants are also those people who don't identify with any religion, either they're agnostics, naturalists, spiritualists. But I do have people who come from different spiritualities, including indigenous spiritualities. A small sample, but it's there.
Yeah. And I think you're speaking in your findings that the kind of motivations are similar, but the source of that motivation perhaps is different with those from more religious backgrounds, and Muslims in particular, calling it from the concept of stewardship, whereas others are calling it sort of responsibility. So I guess my question is like, are you finding that sort of initial point you were interested in, which is the environment as a sort of a space of common concern for people to come together and engage, is that holding in the findings? Are they engaging with each other, or are we having little subgroups of environmentalists?
Yeah. So one of the important thing is people are working on these kind of causes. I think I should have elaborated it more, but people are working on these kind of causes because of the like-minded people around them who share similar values, similar consideration, similar care and concern for the environment. And especially for the Muslims in my data, in my population, I see they have formed a sense of community with these people outside their own projects and initiatives. And they kind of have formed friendships, networks, associations, done so much networking, have informal gatherings and other kind of social or socializations. So they kind of formed a community with these people. And because of these people, they feel more motivated to contribute to these issues, if I am answering what you're asking.
So kind of new communities forming. What about like, so if for some in Mississauga, you spoke about kind of low income house and neighborhoods, are people able to then, because of this common concern, engage with those outside of their normal?
I think here also there's an age factor there.
Right.
You would see a different attitude of youth towards environmental issues, whereas people who are coming at later age from different countries to Canada, you would see a different approach. Their adaptability will be slightly slower than how youth is engaging with these issues, because they are involved in so many educational activities, so many clubs, so many projects, and they have more avenues, and because a lot of them also feel the burden which is being carried forward from previous generations, or from the environmental destruction.
Right. Yeah. Maybe getting back to positionality then, and like what it's I love the idea that somebody responded to you because they thought they could relate, right? When they saw your name. What has it been like doing this field work? What do you think is the significance of you as with all of your positionalities that you've named and doing this type of work?
Yeah. See, I'm an insider as well as outsider. So this position is always kind of hard to maintain. But just here it is still not as a hardcore factor, because I am not judging people on their, religions, but rather their engagement aspect of it.
So religion's not like the main point of
religion will come there,
right?
But it's not the main consideration. Right. It's more about how me as a religious person is engaging with environment, with other people to work on these causes. So I cannot divide that I cannot remove that kind of positionality from people's own worldviews, but I can at least see how they as individuals are contributing. And same as for me, I try my best not to judge people on what they are doing, how they are responding, but try to find the factors which are responsible for that kind of action. I would say that.
Maybe an example too.
Yeah. So I see a lot of young Muslims kind of complaining about how mosques are not doing, or how their religious leaders are not doing enough for the community, for greening the environment, or to talk more about environment, or should take more actions, or should engage more in environmental initiatives. Even how the mosques are still using plastic plates and spoons.
Don't come during Ramadan, please.
Yeah, the next point was there. The next point was there. But so,
But it's also, I guess, like have the Friday sermons, have the teachings, have the programs kind of touched on environmental issues. Yeah. Like, are mosques in touch with where people are at?
Yeah, they do. Right. But kind of blaming them as well as looking at why are they not doing that. Right? People would generally say every day we have to deal with security concerns. Every day we have to deal with, police checks, and why are we holding this kind of congregation in the mosque? Every day we have to worry for the funds. How are the funds gonna come? If it was a church, I would literally give this example, because one participant said if this was a church, they wouldn't at least have to worry about how to arrange the money for any program. Yeah. But because we are Muslims and we are in this difficult situation, for us getting funds is difficult, we don't get time to think about all these things. Yeah. But so like looking at both, for me as a researcher, I have to look at the both lens. One participant complaining that it's not being done enough, but other participant also explaining why it's not done enough for this, because they have other considerations or things to look at. So these two things are important.
Then maybe I still have time to ask. You decided not to include like the religious organizations that are working specifically on environmental issues, all the Green Dean teams, right? Why?
I think initially I wanted to, but kind of piloting and kind of meeting with people helped me realize that there is a lot of emphasis on religion in that. So it's driving from religion.
Right, yeah.
And it's more towards their own community.
It's often mosque programs.
Yes,
or
also
programs,
organizations. There are so many NGOs and, environmental Muslims and so many. Their target population is their own community members, only Muslims.
Yeah.
So when it comes to engagement, they would, as a Muslim group, engage with other people of different other faiths, right? Me as an individual, if I want to engage in environmental work, I don't have to take that baggage of representing my community outside when I engage in these issues. So I just wanted to see how people naturally, organically engage in these issues because it's concern for them. It's not because their communities are concerned or their mosques are concerned or their organizations are concerned for them. So that was the basic idea. But again, there are some things that you cannot avoid. A lot of people who are volunteering and engage in general projects as well, they are also part of Muslim or NGOs as well. This is something even is a limitation for me, even if I try, I cannot completely bifurcate these two things.
Thank you.
Good, thank you very much. So stick around. We're not quite done yet. We'll talk for Zahira. So now we have some opportunity to talk among ourselves, but I think there's a question on Zoom that Scott can.
Sure, yeah. So Rosemary Hancock has a question in 3 parts. The spirit of Devyani lives. So you noted that some of the Islamic concepts that circulate in Muslim environmental discourse have alternate and perhaps quite different meanings. Have you found that there is resistance in your participants' wider Muslim communities to this kind of quote unquote reinterpretation? And on the other side, does using these Islamic concepts alienate the non-Muslims they work with in environmental contexts? To what extent do they actively articulate an Islamic environmentalism when they are in environmental groups contexts? And a final aspect,
Rosie.
have you noticed in your participant observation what Muslims are doing with Islam in environmental contexts, if anything? Are there any Muslim practices, rituals that are being environmentalized, so to speak, or used as a kind of environmental political action?
Okay, so wait.
I almost forgot the first
Hinna, hi Rosie. Her first book was on Islamic environmentalism.
Oh, perfect.
And so hi, she's joining us from Australia. So
thank you for joining.
Yeah. So I don't know which one of the, if you want to give her a summary.
Start with number 1 again.
Yeah.
Okay. So 1A. So you've noticed that these concepts that circulate in Muslim environmental discourse sometimes have different meanings. Have you found resistance in your participants' wider Muslim communities to this kind of reinterpretation?
When I talk about my participants, I barely saw that they had awareness about what exactly Islam is talking about environment. So they know that it's there in the religion, it's part of their religion. They know that Islam is very environmentally cautious religion and it cares for environment, it cares for animals, but they have no idea what exactly are the rules, principles, ideas, examples that religion is talking about. It's just probably coming from because they have heard a random sermon in the mosque, or they have hear words like green Deen or green Islam or things like that, but that's it. So they, in order to understand if it's has a different interpretation or not, they are not engaging with the ideas itself. So they're not engaging with the ideas itself. That's the answer of the first question.
What was the second question?
does the use of these Islamic concepts alienate the non-Muslims in the environmental context?
I think the participants I am looking at are the people who are doing environmental work outside their own religious communities. So me, when I go as an individual to work on pollution or plantation or, 417 highway, they are clearing up the green spaces and creating the highway. I don't go with the idea that I want to tell these people about, what Islam is saying that, don't cut the trees. I am not going with the understanding of I'm going to propagate about Islam. But I am going as a Muslim because I feel it's responsibility as a Muslim to go, or as an individual, I feel responsible to work on such issues. So this kind of topics are not generally, they don't generally engage with this kind of issues while they go with this kind of intention.
But you're not calling yourself an eco-jihadist when you're going to save the trees. How would that make
Not at all. Not at all. You are not going to bring the Muslim terms and terminology. Just treat us like sometimes like normal people who are just going to work for environment out of the consideration. If they don't do that work, there will be no tomorrow.
But Hinna, can I just tease out Rosie's, what I think is underneath that question a little bit is that, are you in some sense then, like if in fact your motivation for going to work in a garden project or the 417 highway project, if part of your motivation is in fact that you feel the Quran or your community, you feel strong Muslim convictions about going and doing that work, and yet then you're working with Rachel or me or Scott or whoever who's not a Muslim, are you then, and if I say, hey, what brings you here, which is a question I suppose you
doing jihad.
Yeah, so would you in some sense, as it were, secularize your motivations? And you would say, I just think we need to pass things on for the next generation, because in a world, in a post-secular world, you might say, we might want you to feel comfortable saying, well, actually, the other day I was reading the Quran, or I heard a wonderful sermon, or Aga Khan says, you might do that in a world in which there was more space for that kind of discourse. I wonder if that's what Rosie's wondering.
Thank you for explaining that,
Yeah.
Paul. I think still, maybe at max they would say it's because their religion tells them to do, but I don't see they are bringing in still religious ideas. They're not engaging with religious ideas as much, either because they lack the knowledge or they think that it's not the space where they should bring in religion too much. But they themselves can carry that in their mind because it's their responsibility being a Muslim to care for the environment, but they don't want to impose it to others in that space.
Cool. Was there a third question?
There was, yeah. But are there ways that some of these practices, like Muslim practices or rituals, have been environmentalized?
A lot. As I mentioned, the idea of green bean means green religion. It's done in two ways. Either already Islamic ideas that were there or Islamic practices that were there, they have been given a green title, or already projects that were there, they are especially for Muslim countries, I would say, and I've seen this example in Pakistan and Indonesia. The projects that were already going on in these countries, religion is bringing into the conversation to legitimize those projects more, so people can understand its importance. For first part, green jihad is a very cool concept these days. A lot of Muslims are actually now willing to go for environmentalism because of this idea. And here jihad is reinterpreted in a way that jihad not for like a physical war, but war to save the planet, war to save the environment, war to save your next generation. So jihad is interpreted in a way that it suits the environmentalism, it suits the relevance of the time, it suits their purposes. Also, there is a whole group called Muslim eco-feminists. They have adopted a lot of feminist ideas, a lot of how women can play a role in this whole environmentalism, and we see a lot of women in this space much more than men. at least in my observation, I see much more women in this space. And how can they play their roles possibly as in their homes, in their everyday activities, when they are interacting with kids, when they are in public spaces. So that's the idea there. And then now the whole idea of green Ramadan. So Ramzan is the month of fasting, and the green Ramzan is mosques have this tagline like green Ramzan, using a lot of paper bowls, paper dishes, and reusable utensils in Ramzan. They would keep separate. I don't say it's up. Everybody follows it. I am not saying, but these are the ideas that are there. So like separate bins for recycling during the aftars and sahars. So certainly these ideas are there. Yeah.
So the first question is there pushback against this in the mosques, in the traditional sort of Islamic community? Because this certainly Muslim ecofeminism, or even taking jihad and changing it into this, I could easily imagine some people would not feel like that was okay.
Yeah, I think you have touched a very important point, and it's been there since point zero to n. Everywhere you see, everybody would say it's westernized. You know, anything innovative, anything you are trying to reinterpret the idea per time, it's westernized. Environmental issues is a westernized concern. Climate change is not real. It's westernized idea.
It's not real.
People are saying, you know, a lot of when they associate with when they associate these ideas with westernization, a lot of people, a lot of Muslims has this idea that it's not real, and it's just a Western propaganda that is there. And it's present in a lot of books, and a lot of scholars have written on that, you know, people are blaming everything to be westernized. So of course, this innovation, either it be this innovation or anything else, this is especially getting a pushback from the older generations, I would say, who has seen a typical form of Islam, a typical form of practicing. And now all of a sudden you ask them to change their, not change, at least modify their kind of practices in order to be, you know, more environmentally friendly. So it's there, but everything that doesn't fit in their framework is so many times called westernized or called something which is not part of their culture.
Thanks, Mark.
That's Rosemary's question.
Amina?
Thank you so much. I had a question in regards to the process of your study. And I apologize if I'm bringing a disciplined way of thinking into your work. Can you talk to us a bit about how your research question is evolving through, because this is qualitative work, right? How is it evolving? I assume the question you have now is what you have currently, and it'll eventually move forward. And can you, I was hoping to hear more on what exactly what type of observations did you have? And how do you think the questions you were probing in your interviews were changing from interview to interview, and how that's influencing you going forward in Vancouver and Victoria, I believe, to go into more observations. I just wonder if you could speak on that. I'm curious.
What kind of observations I'm doing?
Yeah, if you could. Like, how many questions do that?
Yeah. So one part is my interviews. I am doing two observations in each city or each town I'm covering. So these are the public events or public, either they are public events or any advocacy drive or, you know, any kind of sort of community work where people are working for any kind of environmental issues. One of the initial pictures that I shared was, this is one of the climate strike march that was held in Ottawa. And the other one is a tree plantation project in downtown. So I am looking at, obviously I've done, target was to do 2 observations each cities, but I have done like 6 per city. I'm looking at in that observation, I'm not looking at what people are generally, you know, bringing, but I'm more looking at how one is engaging with another person. How are they kind of, what kind of conversations do they have outside the project itself? Are they more socializing? Are they talking about, okay, my kids do that? Are they also expanding their horizons? Are they getting inspirations for other people? So like walking in the march, kind of talking to people, why are they coming? What do they think about it? The second question was, how is my research question evolving? It's just evolving every day.
Like when you started, where did you start from compared to the question
Yeah.
we're seeing now?
Yeah,
Could you go back to the question or? Yeah, forward. Yeah, there it is. Thank you.
There.
Like
yeah.
how do you
Yeah.
think it has evolved? Which obviously
Yeah,
your data now.
I think when I started thinking about this question, I didn't have a lot of consideration that non-human animals can be such a big. I thought about that animal issue is there and animal rights is there, but non-human animals or animals are such a big issue in this conversation, and I thought it's there, but now I've started doing a small activity with my research participants. I have given you 6 pictures. I've started giving them 8 pictures, like a random puzzle, and I give them before I started to like, can you please number them?
Yeah.
It kind of gives me the sense of what the implied hierarchy is. I'm more inclining toward the idea of stewardship than I sometimes hang between engagement and stewardship. I'm still trying to stick to engagement, but you cannot disassociate the idea of stewardship as well. So maybe it evolves to that extent where I just particularly focus on stewardship and the ideas of people around that. But yeah, for now.
Keelan?
Thanks so much for such a fascinating chat. Now, kind of actually ripping off Bob here. When you mentioned that there's like this problem with like Westernization or this idea of Westernization of Islam and kind of making that shift from seeing ourselves as dominant humans to responsible humans. Would you mind talking a little bit about Indigenous participation and what kind of Indigenous interaction you've had? Because like there's an argument to be made that this might be like, or there's a pathway to indigenize Islam. Like, as you said, Islam is a connective force in a lot of ways through this, but like in a colony like Canada, every day we're on stolen land. So like, how does that maybe modify like people's perception of like how Westernized Islam's become in this context?
Islam's Westernization, I am particularly talking, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Yeah.
I'm just trying to do it.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Islam's Westernization, or I would rather say that vested agendas or Western agendas, which are impacting the Islamic ideas now. So a lot of things, a lot of innovation that is coming in the religion in the name of so many other things as well as environment is seen that it's not rooted from religion itself. I think there is also a sense of lack of knowledge here that your own religion talks about environment as well, right? So if there is lack of knowledge or a kind of ignorance there, that ignorance is associated with Islam a lot of times. And this is particularly true for a lot of people who are coming from developing countries. I can at least give you the example of Pakistan. When they are not able to understand something, you would actually, this is a safe heaven for them to just associate with with a westernized idea. A very big example is a lot of people, Muslims still don't embrace the idea of population control because they see it as Western idea and they don't accept this is also an environmental impact on it, right? And it's challenged in so many Muslim countries, and it's just not Pakistan, it's Iran, it's a lot of Middle Eastern countries itself. So I think it's more about lack of ignorance on that part.
I couldn't help but because when Kikila gave his talk a few weeks ago, or was it last week?
It was like
That's
4
not-
months.
I don't know. Recent- let's just say recently. Okay.
It must have been a long
Don't
talk.
be critical.
Yeah.
Recent. When he gave his talk and he was articulating kind of Indigenous ways of being in the environment and viewing the environment, I couldn't help but think of there being some similarities.
Yeah.
And I wonder if the Muslim folks
Yeah, some-
you talk with ever articulate their environmental sensibilities in terms of saying, well, we're here now, and Indigenous people also approach the environment this way, or is that not on their radar?
So this is from my observations that I attended in events. A lot of people do think there are so many parallels between Islam and environmentalist and indigenous ideologies, but my research participants did not mention about it at all. And these are all people who are actively engaged in environmental activism or movements or causes. But in events I have seen, and even I have attended a few events like Water Day celebration or the land celebration, where Muslims are collaborating with indigenous communities very closely because they both share the same value. And they live in Canada, they embrace this importance that they are living in the land of the indigenous people. And they value the land, they value the connection of each being with each other. So this kind of work is going on for sure. And I have attended events, but my research data doesn't speak about that. I have Indigenous people interviews from Ottawa, and these are young people who have a great respect for environment and bringing up very nice stories regarding to the environment and how each element of environment is linked to the other. But they are just people in Ottawa that I've interviewed from Indigenous communities.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. So next week, one of Hinna's supervisors, Lori, is going to be with us, and Doug Ezzy, who is kind of in the general area of Rosie Hancock. He'll be joining us via Zoom, and it's going to be here next week. It's going to be a slightly longer session, so please join us for that. It'll be on non-religion and end-of-life care. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good rest of the week.